Hemingway here.
So I will open the hearing, and you will open the hearing, so we're up for grabs. If anybody would like to state their opinion, please come to the podium. It sounds like you're up.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Barbara Eichinger. I'm the lead petitioner for the petition warrant articles. I'll kind of cover them all together since they're kind of identical for both the town and the school board. So basically, we have 3 petition warrant articles that we're having the public hearing tonight. The first one is a 0% tax cap, which would hold the amount of money that the school district or the town could take from the taxpayers. The second one is placing the default budget responsibility with the budget committee, and that was done basically what the petitioners believe, which I already explained in the deliberative session, is to try to give the budget committee the opportunity to prepare a default budget that was lower than the proposed budget to give the voters more choice. The third petition warrant article was to increase voter participation, and that was to move the elections to the May timeframe. We've got a lot of snowbirds. They can vote absentee, sometimes they don't, but they certainly can't participate in deliberative session. By pushing the election date out, we thought we could get more voter participation. Now, these warrant articles, ladies and gentlemen, are a symptom of the problem that the petitioners are very frustrated with, which is the ever-rising tax rate. Okay. Now, we understand that the assessments are falling. Contrary to the article that was published in the Laconia Daily Sun, my realtor has sent me the data, and what we think happened was that when Mr. Keach looked at the sales data, he then looked at the current assessed value, which is the assessed value as a result of the sale. He didn't look at the assessed value of the property at the time of the sale. So the data that I have here, I have 4 sales here in my neighborhood on Governor's Island. In 2011, 7% below assessed value, approximately 5%. The next one, 8% below assessed value. The third one, 3% below assessed value. The one that Mr. Keach said had some 270 above assessed value or 170% above assessed value was the fact that there's a new house on it. Okay, so that was the lot assessed value, and of course the sale price included the lot, so that was the discrepancy there. It's hardly a comparison. So the petitioners believe and the real estate agents believe that the high tax rate contributes to the drop in assessments and the lower value of the real estates. I did receive some comments from John Goodoo, and he asked me to share them. And he said waterfront real estate values in Guilford are very much affected by in the negative by our mill rate. High mill rates take away from the equity status from any property, much more so than assessment, because assessments can be adjusted according to the market at the time. The tax rate has a definite effect on the sales price. The same property in other towns with a $9 to $14 mill rate would show a noticeably higher sales price. Today's consumer is much more in tune with ongoing cost of home ownership. The second home owner in particular is not looking for lots of services, and that person is not looking to get hammered with a huge tax bill. Our town is unknowingly killing the goose. What would Guilford do if they didn't have that second homeowner to carry half the load? We simply do not have enough big picture people in the right place to get Guilford back on track. Okay, so these are the real estate professionals who believe, as the petitioners do, that the high tax rate is killing the real estate value. You know, on the federal level, the government prints more dollars, and that devalues the dollar. On the local level, as you increase that tax rate, you affect in the negative the value of the underlying asset. And that is an asset that you need in order to fund the essential school district and town services. So this is a result of the problem that we face, and the petition warrant articles are basically what a frustration by the petitioners, and the legislative tools that they have available to them are these types of petition warrant articles, and that's what you're saying. Thank you.
Does anybody on the board ask any clarification questions if you want to?
So confuse you where I grew up with Kevin Leandro, 98 Gunstock Hill. I guess I got to direct this more towards the school board. at the deliberative session, even last night, we were continuously here. Actually, it's a document that I downloaded off the SAU website, those talking points against the petition warrant article, which I was kind of shocked to see. Quote, school board has presented operating budgets below the prior year's spending in 3 of the past 4 years. The school board and budget committee have acted most responsibly in this economy and will continue to do so in future years. I've heard that low budgets in 3 of the last 4 years, several times in the last few weeks. And it got me thinking, say, well, why only go back 4 years? It's kind of a weird number. Why don't we go back 10 years? And so I looked at it, and the fact is, because when you say 3 out of the last 10 years, it doesn't look too good. And I said, well, maybe 4 years is more accurate, because as we all know, probably about the fall of 2007 was when the economy really started to suffer. And it's been a downward, it's been hurting ever since. So, okay, so let's see how the performance is in that period of time that we've had this economic crisis. And what did we come up with? We went from the presented budget 2007, which you then cut the following year, in 2008, which would be the first year of that 3 of the last 4 years, to this current proposed budget, and we're up $1.6 million. So yeah, 3 out of the past 4 years is non-accurate. It's a statistic, but you're still backwards. At the same time, student enrollment went from 1,343 to 1,252 this year, 91 student difference. So, you know, I can't give you an A on performance during the economic crisis. I understand fuel went up. I understand that a lot of insurance went up. A lot of expenses went up. But they're going up for everybody else. People in the private sector are paying their taxes. Not only is it going up for us, but now we have to dip deeper in our pockets to pay higher taxes as well. And this is something that I don't think's been mindful. And, you know, I think Barbara's got some good points there. And, you know, if it was level for the last 4 years, I wouldn't be here. But, you know, we've gone up $1.6 million since 2007, when supposedly 3 out of the last 4 years was cuts. But you can't do a minute cut and then a big jump, minute cut. So that's my comments on that. And the other one on the May town meeting. I own a piece of property in another town. They do meetings in May. Many towns in the state of New Hampshire does their town meeting or deliberative session, you know, SB2 in May. It works very well. There's an adjustment period for the first year, grant you. Planned out properly, it could work. You're going to get more and more people at deliberative session if it's a nice spring day. And articles can be amended at deliberative session. I believe, you know, the goal is to get as many people participating as possible. 100 people, we got, what, 4,000 voters, 5,000 voters, and we had, I think the biggest meeting we had was 130, 140 attendees, and that's really not satisfactory in my eyes. So anything we can do to get people out there, that's what we should do. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have pictures to show?
Not tonight. Not tonight. Normally I tend to wing these things, but given that this is a more formal session, decided to present something or write something.
Point of order, can we
coherent.
get the volume up at all? Is that possible?
Move the mic
No, it would help
closer.
if you speak into the microphone.
Hold on, towards you.
Well, the mics haven't been working at all this way. We couldn't hear them
Are they
earlier.
not on?
Now it's on.
All the lights are blinking. Ours are working.
good TV.
Decisions are made by bureaucrats every day that decide how adults are to live their lives, with little or no input from those adults. Yet we were founded on the radical idea that individuals were sovereign, with rights given by God, and not the kings and nobility that maintained they ruled by God's diktat. That instead of a government that ruled its subjects, government governed with the consent of its citizens. Government was to be a floor on which these citizens could walk, conducting their lives by their own decisions, as they followed their own ideas of what is the pursuit of happiness. Instead of having that government overhead as a ceiling, sending rulings down from above. So where are we? We have unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats making major decisions not on our behalf, but because it is for the common good. Like, in recent examples, creating a desert in the San Joaquin Valley of California, putting tens of thousands of farm workers out of work, and rich farmlands turning to dust, all because of 3-inch bait fish called the snail darter. All because it benefits us all. I think of the bureaucrat that declared that my toilet could only use so much water for the greater good as I hold my plunger aloft. Once again, the toilet's stuck. I think of 2 departments now, the EPA and the NTSB, deciding what kind of car I will buy by doubling the CAFE standards as they decide what kind of energy usage is for the common good. And now another department has decided that their means justifies their ends, and now there's a concern for First Amendment rights being broached over new unenumerated right at the federal government level. And it's not just at the highest level of government that this happens. In Michigan, independent daycare providers were enrolled by the state into the SEIU union simply at the behest of government, feeling that that would be for the common good. It is now also starting to happen in Connecticut with little or no input from the majority of these providers. A few years ago, David Stamps wrote in the Citizen and the Laconia Daily Sun when the tax cap was being presented in Laconia. And he said that the citizens of Laconia did not need a tax cap. The citizens could trust their government not to overspend. I wrote at the time that the mere fact that someone has brought forward a tax cap petition means that you have already lost the trust of your citizenry. It passed. And now we see similar things happening here in Guilford. No, I'm not necessarily talking about just the tax cap or the petitions, but I would ask that you think about the fact that perhaps trust has been lost instead. That the mere fact that these petitions are being brought forward and that both boards here are refusing them shows that there is a big problem here in Guilford between those that govern versus those that are being governed. Jonah Goldberg wrote a best-selling book called Liberal Fascism, and I'm going to read a couple of quotes from it. And some may pillory me for reading them, but it is food for thought. It is totalitarian in that it views everything as political, and it holds that any action by the state is justified to achieve the common good. A second quote is, but therein lies a common principle. The state should be allowed to get away with anything, so long as it is for good reason. To go back to last night's candidates night, and the video is already up on YouTube. A question was asked about the school board implementing full-time kindergarten. The 3 candidates, Doug Lambert, Kurt Weber, and Sue Allen, stood and answered the question. The chair and the past chair both extolled the results that they were getting, and that it was done at a cheaper cost, that everybody benefited from doing that. And yet they never answered the question, why did they implement it against the vote of the citizens of Guilford? Trust? Simply the means justifies their ends, it seems. Thus we see these petitions tonight, and I believe that because it is a lack of trust. But what do you say when a board ignores the decisions of voters and just says, for the common good, we will implement this anyways? We see government, as I said before, government overhead is a ceiling, sending rulings down from above. I speak in favor of these petitions because I believe, in part, the trust has been broken. That you now see citizens trying to put up a higher steel fence around their interests versus what government would have to do to them. instead of for them, or under the guise of doing something for them. I really do ask that each of you here think about that. I understand it would be a lowering of the power that you have and devolving that power to the citizenry. And yet that's what government's supposed to be, is that it does things for the citizens and by the consent of the citizens and not to the citizens. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quickly, Doug Lambert, 42 Farmer Drive. I just quickly want to voice my support for the tax cap for the school and the town. And I speak and I put that support as a candidate for the school board, which is one of the boards that would be affected by the cap. And you know, I think that a lot of the reasons put forth tonight are really valid, so I'm not going to go through all of that again, but I would like to say that I had a discussion with a gentleman today, and he says, well, you know, number one, it's basically a toothless cap. He says, because at the end of it all, it can and most probably will get halted at the deliberative session. It happens now. Whether we've all seen it, and it is unfortunate, and I think, just as an aside, that's why the frustration with the default budget is, yes, the budget committee does create a budget, but in many instances it gets altered at the deliberative session. So I think that the rationale is people would like to see that budget get a chance to be presented to the voters more or less intact. But back to the tax cap. What I said to the gentleman I was discussing this with was that, yes, it can be altered at the deliberative session and really not much has changed, but it will force the governing bodies and the budget committee to construct a budget based upon the cap. So in the end, if it must get changed at the deliberative session or does, that could happen, yes. But at least the whole structure would be built around the cap. And there would be a lot of work, and in the process of the development of the budget, the people of Guilford could become informed as to the true ramifications as it's reported in the media, it gets discussed at meetings. The budget committee does their job, they have public hearings, etc. So, as I said at the deliberative session, it does put the power to raise the budget in the hands of the voters at the deliberative session. And whether as a citizen, Doug, or a school board member, Doug, I'm okay with that. I'm fine with putting the power to raise or not raise our taxes in the hands of the voters of Guilford, because at the end, I trust them. Thanks for listening to me tonight.
Yes.
Sure, go ahead.
Barry Stewart, member. Thanks for having this session. I was just going to listen, but Dale made a comment about the default process, which has always been a pet peeve of mine. I can tell you from experience that I've had a few very good but frustrating conversations about the default budget with the business manager of the school district. And according to him, it's very black and white and follows a process as Dale had suggested. But I pointed the finger at a couple of places where money was added to as perceived by contracts that benefit directly the student that clearly could be debated as not as such. And I think a number of people could agree that it was not as such. The problem was that at the end of the conversation, right, wrong, or indifferent, I had no place to take any argument further. There's no vehicle to dispute the default budget. It's handled by a bureaucrat. A nice one. I play hockey with him. I think he's here. I enjoy that. But the point of the matter is, it's not handled by elected officials. And this budget committee that just was seated last year, if it's so black and white, I'll bet it would take them a year to come up with a default budget, because they had good debates. We have a pretty evenly divided body. I'm not sure what next year's will yield, but regardless, it, probably as a New Englander, I should say irregardless, but it should be handled by elected officials. And the more of them, in this case, the better, because at least you have a place to go take your case. You can't do it now. If anyone has a problem with the default budget, too bad. It is what it is, and you have to deal with it. So that's my point there. And the tax cap, I favor in some respect. I've heard some sides of it that say, is it toothless, is it going to hurt the budget committee process? Well, the fact of the matter, as Doug pointed out, that the deliberative session power is always there. I would respectfully say that we have all the town's government here, the leaders of both budgets, and so it's probably the best place for me to say it. It's frustrating as a resident, and it always amazed me when I talk to the people in town that most people don't view the budgets as two totally separate entities. I mean, it just is kind of surprising. I mean, they just look at, this is our government. Why can't the town share their tractor with the school? We've heard this before. And having been in the process, I understand the differences, and it's only because I went through it and lived it, and I understand and respect it. But now that I look back, now that I can look at it as a resident, what really frustrates me is that when, to the town's credit, when it goes through the process, I think the respect for the voters there. At the deliberative session, to my frustration, when a small group of people can add money to the budget and get it voted on at the floor and have it added to the budget, at least the town leaders respect that. It frustrates me, but they respect it. When it becomes on the ballot and it's voted and it's positively done, they generally do what the voters have asked them to do. I can't say the same for the school district. Very little has changed at the deliberative session. However, at the ballot, we know that there's initiatives that have been voted on by the citizens that have been largely ignored. So I think that the cap is a result of, as Skip said, some mistrust or some loss of trust, because we have a body of government that isn't as open to public comments. So I support these. Unfortunately, I support all of our government. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Anybody else where we start on first go around?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Barbara Eichinger, 558 Edgewater Drive. Just a comment on the deliberative session process where the budget can be raised at deliberative session. So let's go down that path. Let's say the budget, we have a cap in place, and at deliberative session the budget is raised. Well, now that budget goes to the voters, and the voters could vote it down in favor of the full budget. Okay, so even, like we have today, the voters could still have the final say beyond deliberative session in voting down any increased budget in favor of the full budget. Okay, so there's always an escape hatch there. The other reason why we see the tax rate go up is because the assessments are dropping. So in the private sector and in our individual families, when you see your income dropping, okay, you usually drop your spending. Okay, so although we've seen level and decreases, it's not at a rate to catch up with the drop in the assessments. Okay, so some of the towns tend to work backwards. They track the assessments. Okay, they look at their spending. They work backwards in order to keep their tax rate level. Okay, and that's one of my suggestions. I did have a conversation with someone who is very in tune to the economy. He manages a capital fund worth $139 billion. Okay, he said, Barbara, this this country is headed for a financial train wreck. It says we take in 2.6 trillion and we spend 3.8 trillion. It is unsustainable. Okay? Now on the local level, people's homes are some of their most valuable resource, their most valuable asset. So in order to keep that asset valuable, so that you can continue to pull on it to fund the essential town services and school district services, you gotta protect the value of that real estate. And by keeping that tax rate stable, we'll go a long way to do that. Thank you.
Excuse me, Dave Horvath, 28 Timberlane, Guilford. I need to ask a question first, John, and I apologize. I got here a little late, so I didn't hear all the ground rules. Is there any feedback, or is this just a listening session?
Only by choice of the board members.
Okay, thank you. I've listened to various speakers up here tonight, and I think we're all members of Guilford, and I think and wish and hope that would see more people get involved in the process. But I do have some comments to some of the previous speakers that were here. One, I would say, trust in elected officials. I still like Ronald Reagan's words, trust but verify. The RSAs of this state do give us an opportunity, and I'm an elected official, so in terms of I'm a member of the Budget Committee. So I point that out from this point of view, trust but verify. And the RSAs of this state allow either the elected body, school board, town, or their agents, meaning Mr. Isabel, Mr. Ruggles, hardworking people, excellent people, very cooperative people when I need to get information. But back to trust and verify. Because the RSA, as we've seen some of the things that have happened via votes in this town, I think that's why some of these issues are on the table, some of these issues are on the ballot, why people are asking questions. On the trust side, as who was it? I think it was Mr. Murphy asked the question about the kindergarten tonight, or stated about the kindergarten. We had a situation several years ago. The school board put on the ballot, do we have an all-day kindergarten? The people of this town said no. We didn't want to fund it. Last night at the candidate session, several speakers, Sue, Kurt, Doug, all spoke to the issue. Well, good arguments. Studies say certain things, certain results. Locally, within our town, certain cost result, money saved. That's today. But let's look at the dichotomy of the situation. We have a situation where people said no. An elected body said we're to do it anyways. Now, because they didn't have the trust in the voters, they only did what they wanted to do. That's why questions come before the town, the committee. Why do we have these issues? Because the vote was out there. Now we have this situation. We voted once, said no. The board now has it on there. How do we get rid of it? If tomorrow, or not tomorrow, next year, the year after, there's not enough kids, doesn't warrant, cost isn't there, is the board going to arbitrarily say, well, we don't need all-day kindergarten? Or perhaps maybe they'll take a different direction. Maybe they'll say, well, down in Massachusetts, we have all-day daycare for preschool kids, and studies show this is good. And by elected fiat, we're going to do this. Is that what we want? The town people have spoken on many issues. I could bring up football, I could bring up many other things. There are other issues before the table. And I ask the question, maybe the budget committee will have to do a lot of hard work. Maybe we'll have to work with Scott, with Jeff. Maybe we'll have to, as Mr. Stewart had pointed out, maybe we have to sit down and look at, I know when I do my income taxes, and I studied taxes over the years, if there's a gray area, you're darn right I'm going to go with my favor. I suspect the board of both town bodies do that. And that comes up with the budget committee. Well, maybe, as we are elected officials too, as one of the other speakers spoke to, maybe we should have trust in another body to look at it. Yes, it will take some hard work, but maybe we'll find out they're right. Maybe we'll find out the budget, or the default budgets that have been put forward to us are not right. That's why I speak in favor of this, because I've seen some things where we would expect in a small town that we would see that our elected officials would listen, answer to, and respect the vote. We see time and time again where our committees, our towns put forth different operations where they say, we want the input of the people, but they only want the input they want. They don't listen to the elected vote. And I think that's a very important measure, that we start looking at these things. That's why these things are being put forward. And when we talk in terms of today, private sector, public sector, recent years in particular, public sector continues to get raises, no caps put on what those positions are in this particular town. Benefits, highly benefited, whether they be union or non-union officials. And nobody's taken a real hard look. We see some dibbling around the edges, but we don't see a hard look at what's really going on. The people of Newfound took some drastic action this year, which I'm sure everybody here is well aware of. And last night there was some other discussion. What if, and maybe some other people had heard this before, but what if Governor's Island decides and finds a way legislatively to form their own district, and their tax base is not here? By default, we're already in that situation where Newfound finds themselves in. I think we have to take a hard look, people, at where we're at, what we're doing, and how we're affecting the townspeople. And as I say, back to the public sector, while the public sector has continued to get raises, private sector, and that gap has changed. Once upon a time, people worked in the public sector because they got good benefits, recognized the pay wasn't so great, but there were some other things that compensated for it. Now they're highly compensated, more compensated with equivalent private sector jobs, and we need to change that. And if you guys, as our elected officials, don't change it, that's why you see the actions that are coming before you. Now, I ask again, back to the kindergarten issue. How do we change that now? How would that change? I hope somebody could respond. We had an election that said, no, don't do it. Now we got a board that says by elective fiat or executive fiat, they're going to do it. How does that change now? And why are they right? Why do they defy the will of the people of this town? And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
I'm going to just say, all due respect to the chairman of the school board, I don't have any issues per se with the merits of kindergarten. That may come as a shock to some people in the room. I sat with Dr. Billings. I think this was a product of some of his research as well, and didn't necessarily argue with his conclusion. The point that I think some of the petitioners here are making is that, and I didn't kind of wrap up the last time I stood here, is I think that a tax cap is almost irrelevant in this town, but necessary, if you will, because it will bring more people to the deliberative session. Knowing this town, as I have in the past few years, I don't think it'll happen immediately, but I think as the years go by, because money will get added. At a zero tax cap, you can guarantee it'll get added. And what you'll end up with is a more town meeting-like style deliberative session, I believe. But all due respect to the chairman, I'm afraid it is arrogance to say that if what you did is is ignoring the tax, the voter, because it is. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have done it. I just think you should have done it differently. I think you can do things like that and bring the people of the town into the equation instead of alienating a segment of them. Not everyone, obviously not everyone in this room, but I think the people skills need to be examined in a decision. I don't disagree with perhaps what the outcome will be for the kids. I don't have an issue with that per se, but how it was done was not the best method. Otherwise, those speakers wouldn't be here today, I don't believe. So it is, sorry.
Terry?
Kevin Lemon, 98 Menstock Hill Road. I'd like to respond to something I just heard. Is it Mr. Hutchins or Hutchinson? Hutchinson. The budget that was brought forth to the budget committee this year from the school board, the school board cut nearly nothing out of it. I mean, I think it was one part-time position that had overlapped inadvertently. We cut nothing out of it. And when we went through the budget, there really wasn't anything that we could cut. I mean, it was pretty thin. They did away with a lot of the excesses, and sometimes maybe it was a little too thin. But where it's inflated, we can't touch. It's the contracts. There's a teacher contract in place. They went to deliberation on that. I mean, they fought it from what I understand, and I'm not arguing about that. We have 18 non-union contracts, administrator type positions. Not 130 as it was announced at the deliberative session. If that is the case, then somebody needs an explanation of why we're not following right to know laws. Probably 2 of those positions should be under contract. The rest should be at-will employees, just like the other non-union employees. At will. Yet, they're very highly inflated, and they're under contract so that they can't be touched by the budget committee. And that's where the trimming needs to come from. It's not gonna hurt the children. That's all fear mongering. I've heard that several times. It's about the children. We only care about our pocket, but we care about the taxpayers, the people that's struggling to pay taxes, people in this town right now that's losing their homes. I think it was 21 foreclosures this last year. Last year it was 26. You know, not everybody in this town lives in Governor's Island or Dockham Shore Road. You know, there is if you look at the voter rolls, there's a lot of trailer parks in this town. A lot of people are struggling. And their tax bills aren't as high, and we need to think about them as well. Thank you. Just for point of clarification, I don't mean cutting over last year. I mean cutting versus what you had already did. We cut from what the school board's budget. When it came to the budget committee, we did pretty much no additional cuts. And I don't think you can argue with that. I'm not talking about over last year. I'm talking from your budget come to us.
Exactly, because I think we trimmed about as much as we could.
I'm not arguing that fact right now.
Croc TV.